Okay, everybody, thank you once again for tuning in for the latest installment today of our Wednesday walks through Culver History. And I want to thank, right at the outset, Jerry and I, class of 57, who's behind the camera, helping make this happen today. Jeff Kenny, Museum and Archives Manager for Culver Academies. And I'm in one of my favorite places on Culver's property. We're not on the campus proper, of course, but this is a place that's just rich with history. And it's so much the story of the origins and genesis of Culver. As many of us know, Henry Harrison Culver, the founder of Culver Academies, he's originally from Ohio, but by 1864 he and his brothers have started the Culver Brothers Stove Company, which is based in St. Louis. And incidentally, if you want to see one of the very first models they put out in 1864, we have it at the Culver Academies Museum. So once we're open again and not social distancing, please come take a look. So Mr. Culver actually is he's fairly young when he comes here to retire, more or less, to this spot, actually. He has already met his wife not far from Lake Maxinkuckee at what is kind of really a wide spot in the road called Wolf Creek here in Marshall County, between Culver and Plymouth. And there he meets Emily Jane Hand. The Hand family was prominent in business around the county, and she was a school teacher, which certainly probably had an impact on what's going to happen in the future. But Henry Harrison is ill by the 1880s, and his doctor tells him he needs to find a place to rest with plenty of fresh air and sunshine and nature. And so he comes to this spot. He buys initially 90 acres in 1883. Now, if you can imagine this place, what I love about where we are now is how much of the old look and the old world is still here. Where I'm standing right now is probably familiar to many of you. This is a path that comes up essentially south from the crew building, the rowing center, the white debris on our campus. And if you're a woodcrafter or have been involved in woodcraft, so you may have walked up this path, although maybe not this far. But this is actually the old wagon road. There was no East Shore Drive or State Road 117 that today goes around the east shore of Maxinkuckee. This was the road, and we'll see some old pictures here, and you'll see that what we're looking at today is very much what Henry Harrison Culver saw in the 1880s. So he buys these 90 acres initially. And the building behind me here that we call today the Culver Farmhouse is the first structure that he buys. In fact, to our knowledge, it's the oldest structure on the entire lake. Certainly the oldest structure that Culver owns. And that's because of what's underneath it. This is one of the original pioneer log cabins that's still under the facade of the farmhouse. The original pioneers came here in 1836, the first European settlers from southern Indiana. And at that time, there were still Potawatomi Native Americans here. Of course, tragically, 2 years later, in 1838, they're going to be forced away in the Trail of Death. But when Mr. Culver gets here, just some 40-odd years later, this is still largely wilderness. The railroad has just run through Culver to Lake Maxinkuckee. Of course, it wasn't Culver at that time. The town was called Marmont. So the Culver family, his children come here and play, and you can just imagine him looking out on this beautiful view of Abanabi Bay and beginning to maybe foster that dream that's going to start with a Chautauqua Hotel in 1889, and of course by 1894 will become Culver Military Academy. So just another view here. Of course, behind me you can see the house that Henry Harrison Culver had built in 1886, which we call the Culver Homestead, and that's really the house he had built for his family to live in. Many of you will remember across the road to the east where today the golf course is, there was a barn. If you golfed on that course, there was a large barn that was part of kind of the farm operation over there. It burned in the mid-1980s. There was kind of another adjacent farmhouse, which was not the main Culver dwelling. But an interesting feature here of this spot, again, so much history. These really pronounced mounds that are kind of that I'm in the middle of. And if you come here, you can see these in person. The county historian Daniel McDonald wrote that there's some debate about whether these are Miami Native American burial mounds or whether they might be a Potawatomi signal mound. I might add it's also possible they're a glacial feature, but they are certainly pronounced mounds. Just add one other feature behind me towards the lake. There's a really prominent sort of curling pathway, and in the old pictures of the homestead here, you'll see there were whale jawbones. Now, those are not a Maxinkuckee whale. That's a whale that Mr. Culver's sons brought from Nantucket, at least I should say the jawbone. And so that used to be kind of the ceremonial entryway when you came by steamboat to his pier to see Mr. Culver. Those jawbones, by the way, if you were a woodcrafter up into at least the 50s, those were positioned outside the woodcraft log cabin there. And there are old pictures of those. You can still see, many of you may have touched or taken a little piece of those whale jawbones. They fell apart many years ago, but there's still little remnants of that path that go down to the lake. So Mr. Culver, again, you know, you can picture him going down this wagon road to what is going to be the campus. He's shortly thereafter buys another many acres, to the point that he's got 300 acres by the time he starts his Culver Park Assembly Chautauqua in 1889. Very successful. We talked about that the other week. Brings 10,000 plus people, but he's not really satisfied with that. And so 5 years later, of course, the rest is history, right? He starts the Culver Military Academy in September of 1894 using the Chautauqua buildings. So just wanted to kind of take a quick stop here, a little bit off the beaten path, not a feature of Culver that many of us see regularly, but if you're on campus and you're visiting and you have a chance, walk up this beautiful path. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you again soon. In the meantime, stay well, and we hope to see you next week.